September 1944. The German border. The Hürtgen Forest. From the outside, it looks like an ordinary forest. Trees, hills, streams, fog, and cold. But the American troops who entered this forest never emerged the same. Hürtgen. 160 square kilometers of darkness. Dense pine forests make air support impossible. Narrow paths block tank movement. Landmines turn every step into a danger. German troops weave an invisible defense, with traps set in the trees and weapons buried in the trenches. And the American troops enter this forest without fully understanding why entering it is so dangerous. For 3 months, from September 1944 to February 1945, 24 different American divisions fought in this forest. More than 33,000 Americans were killed or wounded. The territory gained a few kilometers. Historians still ask today, why did this forest have to be taken? And the answer unsettles everyone. This battle unfolded between two forces. On one side, the U.S. First Army, under General Courtney Hodges, the first American ground forces to set foot on German soil. On the other side, Nazi Germany's Western Front defensive units, tired but fighting on their own soil, in their own forest. Dates: September 19th, 1944 to February 10th, 1945. Duration: 5 months. This was the longest ground battle the U.S. Army fought at a single location during World War II. Location: the Hürtgen Forest, a 160 square kilometer pine forest region in western Germany, near the Belgian border, stretching toward the Roer River. It remains a desolate and quiet place to this day. Visitors occasionally still come across remnants from that era within the forest. A small but significant note: this battle is one of the least known and least discussed chapters of the Western Front. It remained in the shadow of Normandy, the Ardennes, and Berlin. Yet its casualties were on par with those of many of these famous battles. History that remains silent sometimes becomes the heaviest history of all. Field analysis. The Hürtgen Forest is a perfect fit for the defender, but a living hell for the attacker. Dense pine trees block out the casualties. This renders air support virtually useless. The U.S. Army's greatest advantage, air superiority, is ineffective in this forest. Planes cannot drop bombs without being able to see their targets. Narrow paths and steep hills make tank maneuvers impossible. Without armored support, the infantry is left alone against German positions reinforced with heavy weapons. The Germans have known this terrain for years. Every corner of the forest, every stream, every hill. They've set up their positions accordingly. They've placed snipers in the treetops. They've laid mines along the trails. Artillery target points have been marked in open areas. And then there's the tree bomb. German artillery adjusts its shells to explode at the tops of the trees. This makes it impossible to take cover in a standard trench. Soldiers in the trenches cannot protect themselves from the rain of shrapnel falling from above. This tactic instilled a deep psychological fear in American troops. The terrain favored the Germans from start to finish. The Americans entered this forest fully aware of this. And this decision is still debated today. Force comparison. The balance of power appeared to favor the American side as they entered this battle. Numerical superiority, supplies, equipment. The Americans had it all. But deep within this forest, none of it proved as effective as expected. On the American side, within the First Army, 24 divisions served in this area at various times. Artillery support was strong, but accurate firing was difficult within the forest. Supply lines were constantly disrupted due to mud and damage. On the German side, initially, relatively weak and exhausted units. But the forest defense offset this weakness. The Germans inflicted heavy casualties with limited forces from well-entrenched positions. And here lies the real mystery. Why did American commanders insist so much on this forest? Its strategic value was debatable. It was necessary to secure control of the Roer River dams. That much is true. But was passing through the forest essential for that? Some historians say no. The forest could have been bypassed from the south. The dams could have been targeted via a different route. But the command did not sufficiently evaluate these alternatives. And this failure to evaluate them affected the lives of 33,000 Americans. This is Hürtgen's most unsettling question. Perhaps this battle never had to last this long. Preparation phase and command structure. The command structure of this battle is a subject worthy of analysis in its own right. General Courtney Hodges, commander of the U.S. First Army, an experienced, disciplined figure, yet one who faced history's harsh judgment when it came to Hürtgen. Hodges overestimated the strategic importance of the forest and disregarded alternative routes. Eisenhower and Bradley were overseeing overall coordination of the Western Front. But the decision regarding Hürtgen was largely left to Field Command. And Field Command persisted in pushing through the forest. The unit commanders on the ground, however, changed constantly. When a division suffered heavy losses, it withdrew and was replaced by a new division. This rotation system had both advantages and disadvantages. It allowed exhausted units to rest, but each new unit started with the same mistakes. The forest's memory could not accumulate. On the German side, the defense of the area was conducted under multiple commanders. During the most critical period, General of the Infantry Hans Schmidt was the sector commander. With limited forces and a cleverly positioned defense, the Germans held the Americans at bay for months. And one more name: Ernest Hemingway. Yes, that Hemingway. As a war correspondent, he was stationed behind the lines at Hürtgen and described what he saw as the worst war conditions I've ever witnessed. Hemingway's testimony remains a literary record of just how grueling those days were. The chronological course of the war. September to October 1944. The first step, the gateway to the forest. The 1st Infantry Division, Big Red 1, enters the forest's front lines. There is progress in the early days, but it is slow and costly. Every kilometer means disproportionate losses. The Germans are not retreating. They are merely pulling back a step and holding their ground again. Inside the forest, the concept of time shifts. Days blur into one another. November 1944, Schmidt Village. 1 step forward, 2 steps back. The 28th Infantry Division targets Schmidt Village. The village is taken, but not held. German counterattacks retake the village. The Americans retake it and lose it again. This back and forth shattered the division within a few days. The 28th Division suffered such heavy losses during those days that its spirit was broken. The survivors couldn't recover for months. November to December 1944. The ongoing strain. Units are rotated in and out, but the forest spares no one. The cold intensifies. The mud deepens. Cases of frostbite and war fatigue become as serious as physical injuries. Some soldiers are defeated not by the Germans, but by the forest. Cases of psychological breakdown are on the rise. Doctors diagnose war fatigue in the terminology of the time. Today, we would call it post-traumatic stress disorder. December 1944. In the shadow of the Ardennes. On December 16th, the Ardennes offensive begins. Some American units in Hürtgen are immediately redirected south. The forest takes a backseat. But the fighting doesn't stop. It continues with fewer troops and under harsher conditions. January to February 1945, the final stage was. Units reinforced after the Ardennes returned to Hürtgen. Throughout January and February, The forest's final strongholds are cleared one by one. On February 10th, 1945, the battle officially ends. The Hürtgen Forest is under American control. But there is no celebration. There is silence. And the thousands of names left behind, strategic and psychological impacts. Assessing the strategic outcome of the Battle of the Hürtgen Forest is far more complex than that of other battles. The forest was eventually captured. The Roer River was reached. The advance westward continued. From this perspective, the operation was a success. But we must ask, was this success worth the cost? 33,000 American casualties, dead, wounded, captured, frozen, and suffering psychological breakdowns. Territory gained, a few dozen kilometers. Duration, 5 months. And the Roer dams remained out of control for months even after the forest was captured. Because the Germans opened the dams, flooding the river, and once again delaying the American crossing. What if this forest had never been entered? Some historians argue that an alternative route to the south could have achieved the same strategic objective with far fewer casualties. This debate continues in American military historiography. The psychological impact, however, was too vast and profound. For American soldiers, Hürtgen became one of the worst memories of the war. Those who returned home did not speak of this forest for years. Some never spoke of it at all. For the German side, however, Hürtgen was one of their last major defensive successes. With limited forces and poor positioning, they held back a superior enemy for months. This honor remained the sole positive memory of the war for many of those soldiers. The Hürtgen Forest is a quiet place today. The trees have grown, the paths are overgrown with moss, and the traces of the war lie buried beneath the soil. But do you know what lies beneath that soil? Bodies that have yet to be found. Unexploded ordnance, the nameless dead. Remnants from that era are occasionally unearthed during excavations in the area. History has not buried itself in this forest. This battle represents the hardest lesson war history has taught us. Sometimes the greatest mistake is not attacking the wrong enemy, but fighting in the wrong place at the wrong time for the wrong reason. Every American soldier who died at Hürtgen fought for his country. No one questions that. But the command decisions that sent them into that forest carry one of history's heaviest questions. Perhaps the most honest assessment came from an American officer. We had to take Hürtgen, but it didn't have to cost this much. Remember that sentence, because many pages of military history can be read through that sentence. In our next video, we're heading into the heart of Germany. 1945. The Rhine River, Germany's last natural line of defense, and one of history's largest river crossing operations, launched to breach that line. A bridge, a chance, and the American soldiers who were the first to cross it. The Remagen Bridge, in the next video.